This week's video is going to be all about book sleeves. So this is the small size that's going to be included in today's video. But this pattern is for a quilted book sleeve that has a little bow tie on the side and a zipper pocket on the front. So you can use this for lots of different things, not just books. You could use it for journals, you could use it for Bibles, you could use it for Kindles. I'm including a list on the pattern that tells you what sizes will fit in each different size of the book sleeves. There's going to be 4 different sizes to this. I don't have the examples with me right now because my daughter took them to put in one of her booths for the market, and I had to ask her to bring one back so I could film the intro to this. This is going to be all over the place. But anyway, so this has a little pocket on the front. Each one of them has a zipper. Even the small size is large enough to fit a pen or highlighters, whatever you need for your journal or your Bibling or your notebooks, whatever you need. And then each one has a fabric tie on the side and then the book sleeve that is fully lined. The outside is quilted, so you're going to quilt this first, and then you're going to cut out your pattern pieces and then put it all together. It's a super simple project to put together, so I believe this is a confident beginner could easily do this project. Like I said, it comes in 4 different sizes from small, this one is the small, all the way up to an extra large, which should fit certain size laptops. I can't remember off the top of my head what size laptops, but I want to say at least a 13-inch laptop for sure. I think an iPad mini would fit in one of these, Kindles, like I said. So you can use them for all sorts of different things. So if you are ready to make one of these adorable little quilted book sleeves, let's get started. Okay, the first step you're going to do is you're going to take your quilt batting and your outer piece. And these are cut larger than the finished cut size that you need for your pieces. That way, if for some reason stuff shifts when you're quilting it, or it doesn't quilt all the way to the edge or whatever, you have plenty of room to kind of work around that and cut your finished piece out. But I use a quilting guide over here, and I've got it set to 1 inch. So I'm just going to do 1 inch vertical lines on here. And basically what you do is the first row, you line the edge of your fabric up with the quilting guide, and I have my stitch length lengthened to between a 5 and a 6. And then you're just going to quilt one straight line. And then for the next line, you're going to line up this stitching line with this quilting guide. And as long as you focus on this quilting guide along that stitch line, all of your lines will be straight and evenly spaced. So there's the second one. And I know this is on black, so you can't really see it. There's the back. And so you're just quilting this to the quilt batting. You're not quilting the lining on here because we're going to make a separate lining for this. So I'm just going to continue to quilt all of my pieces. I've got a whole assembly line going here with several different sizes, but this is the size medium that I'm going to do in this video. So I'm going to continue quilting this, and once you get done quilting it, it'll look something like this, where you can see the lines on the back and see how this kind of shrank up a little bit here. That's why we cut this piece bigger than our finished piece, and then that way I can go ahead and cut out my finished size for my pattern piece out of this piece once I'm done. So I'm going to go ahead and finish quilting this, and then we'll go on to the next step. Okay, once you have these all quilted, you're going to trim them down to the size that it says in the pattern. So let me trim these down. So what I like to do is I like to get a fresh edge on this one side and then measure from there. And like I said, while I was quilting these, you do this so that if for some reason it like shifts or whatever, then that way you have a nice clean edge on all 4 sides. So I'm going to trim this down. I'm looking at my measurements. There's a chart in the pattern. So I was just trying to remember what size I was making. So that's those 2 sides, and then let me straighten up the top. And I think I need a new rotary blade because this one is not cutting great, and I have divots in my mat from where I cut all the time, and so sometimes it doesn't cut that great. All right, so you're going to cut both of these down to size. So I'm going to do that, and then we will continue on. Okay, the next step for your book sleeve is going to be the zipper pocket. So on my example here, gosh, there's so much fuzz everywhere. You'll see that there's a little zipper pocket on the front, and this is to put pens or highlighters or bookmarks or whatever you need for whatever book or journal you have in here. And so we're going to do this by putting the zipper on the top edge. So I always like to take mine and make sure that it's going to be going the correct direction. So this is going to be my top edge. And then you're going to take your zipper. I'm using zipper tape, so Zipper by the Yard, which comes with these little zipper pulls. I ordered a big package off of Amazon. It has a bunch of different colors, and I have yet to find a project that does not match some of those zippers. Not super high quality, but it will work. So you're going to take your zipper or your zipper tape, and you're going to place it right sides together with your fabric. And I'm going to clip this down so that it doesn't move. And you want it to hang over both edges just a little bit. That way you have plenty of wiggle room as far as shifting or anything like that. So then you're going to sew pretty close to the zipper teeth. You will need a zipper foot for this, or I use an 1/8 inch presser foot on my sewing machine all the time. That way I don't have to switch back and forth between a regular foot and a zipper foot. So you're just going to stitch close to those zipper teeth down that edge. You want to back stitch at the beginning and the end, and then you're going to flip the seam allowance down towards the wrong side of the fabric, and you're going to top stitch on the front side about 1/8 of an inch away from this fold. I like to kind of pull my fabric down and my zipper up so that it's a nice sharp crease along there. Okay, so what that's going to do is that's going to hold your fabric down away from your zipper so that your fabric doesn't get stuck in your zipper. The nice thing about Zipper by the Yard is that you don't have to put the pull on first. You're not fighting with moving that pull out of the way while you're sewing it on to your project. But if you can use a regular pre-made zipper for this, not that big of a deal. Okay, the next step is going to be to put our pocket onto the front of our front piece. So you're going to take and measure down the measurements in the pattern, and you're going to take the right side of your pocket, which has the zipper teeth, and this is going to seem like you're doing it upside down, but you're not. You're going to place the edge of your zipper tape on where that measurement is. So you can measure down and make a mark with a heat erasable pen or a chalk marker. That one's out of chalk. Since this is dark fabric, I'm having to use white so I can see it. So you can make a little mark like that if you want to on your project, or make a line. And then you're going to take your zipper tape, remember the right side, so the teeth side down, so that the right sides of the fabrics are touching. And you're just going to center that on here. You want to line up the edges of your pocket with the edges of your body piece. So you're going to have the body going down, the zipper going up, right sides together. And you can pin this in place if you need to, just so it doesn't shift. It's a little bit harder to use clips here. And then you're going to take this and you're going to sew right along those zipper teeth again. Once you have that done, you're going to fold your zipper pocket down, and the edges of your pocket should line up with the body piece. So then you can take clips, clip this all the way around, and you're going to baste over your zipper and go all the way around. But before you do that, you do need to put your zipper pull on if you are using Zipper by the Yard. Otherwise, your zipper will not have any teeth. So let me use my zipper jig here. I sell these zipper jigs in my store. I've shown them a bazillion times on how to use them, but they work super well to add that zipper pull on. You have your zipper pull, put it somewhere in the middle so you're not having to sew over it or around it, and line your pocket back up. Then you're going to clip around the edge, and you're going to baste over the end of the zipper so that your zipper pull won't pull off, and baste all the way around the edges of the pocket. You want to make sure that you pull this down to where this has got a nice fold up here. And you're going to baste at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, once you have that done, you can go ahead and trim off the excess zipper, and you can clean up any strings or threads that are hanging off this plaid fabric frays a little bit. So, all right, so you have the front portion of your book sleeve done. Now I put this on to where the zipper is going to close to the right. You probably want to put it on where your zipper is going to close to the left, because you are going to be putting these ties on the right side. So I'm going to take this off real quick and flip it around, and then meet you back here for the next step. Okay, now I've fixed it. So make sure when you're putting your zipper pull on that it is closing to the left. Now you're going to take the other body piece that you've quilted, and you're going to lay them right sides together, and you're going to clip around the edges, and then you are going to sew from the right side, so the side opposite of where your zipper closes, from the right side up the long side and back over to the right side. So the two short sides and the left edge will be sewn. You're going to leave this right edge open. And that's at 1/4 inch seam allowance. And make sure that zipper pull is out of the way. Okay, once you have that sewn around those 3 edges, you're going to trim your corners off. Be sure not to clip through your stitching right there. And then you can turn it right side out and look and make sure you've got everything in the right places and that all your edges got caught. And poke the corners out and check them. So that's what the outside of your book sleeve should look like. Now we're going to, okay, so we have our outside done with our zipper closing to the left, open on the right. So now we need to do our ties, because it's going to tie here, and then we need to do the lining. So let's finish those. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my lining. Actually, I'm going to start with my ties first. So the ties are just long strips of fabric, and what we're going to do is we're going to fold them in half, and with right sides together. This fabric doesn't have a wrong or a right side. It's the same on both sides. But if you have a fabric that has a wrong side and a right side, you're going to make sure that they are right sides together. And I'm just going to put some clips down the long edge to keep it kind of straight, because sometimes when you sew one of these long strips like this, it can kind of shift a little going with the under the presser foot, and the feed dogs can like make the fabric shift a little bit, so they kind of start getting a little wrinkly. But on these, we're going to sew at 1/4 inch seam allowance across one short end and all the way down one long edge, leaving the other short edge open. and then that way we can turn it right side out. So we're going to do this to both of our ties. Just came back from lunch and I literally cannot think straight. So 1/4 inch seam allowance. You're going to pivot at the corner to make a nice sharp corner, and then 1/4 inch all the way down. Be sure you back stitch right here at the end, because when you go to turn this right side out, that's a little stress point. And man, this fabric frays. Okay, now to turn this right side out, I suggest using something like a chopstick or a wooden dowel works great. They do make tools for this, but you probably have these things at home. So you're going to push the closed end down on that chopstick and get it going. And then once you get it started, you can just feed this down on this chopstick and push the end out. And once you get that end pushed out, you can grab that end and it should just turn right side out. And then you can use this chopstick to go up in there and push your corners out so that your corners are nice and sharp. And then you're going to take this over the iron and you're going to give this a really good press so they're nice and flat. And you're going to repeat on the other long strip. Once you have both of your ties pressed with the right sides out, you're going to take the body of your book sleeve and you're going to find the center of it. So I just fold mine in half and then I add a clip at the center. And then I match that up on the back side. And then you're going to clip your ties on with the raw edge, matched up with the raw edge of your book sleeve. Now I like to make sure which side is going to the top where my pocket is, and then I'll do the seam of my tie facing down. And I like to leave mine overhang probably about 1/2 inch on this end, and then that way I know that like this fabric frays, and so it's not going to fray and pull out of the seam. If you do it, you know, really close to the edge, sometimes your fabric will fray, and then it can like pull right out of the seam. And now I'm going to baste these on so they don't move at 1/8 inch, and that'll also help make it a little stronger in there. Just make sure that you're only sewing through the one layer when you do this. That way you don't sew your book sleeve closed. All right, now we're going to set that aside and we're going to do our lining. The lining is very simple. This fabric doesn't have a right or wrong sides, but you want your right sides together on your lining, and you're going to sew along the same 3 edges, leaving the right edge open. If you have directional fabric, you're going to want to make sure that your print is going in the correct direction. So if the right side is open, that your print is facing up and down. I always suggest for beginners to not use directional fabric to start with, because inevitably you're going to cut it upside down. And that happens all the time. All right, so now we're going to leave this with the wrong sides out. So your seams should be on the outside. And we're going to tuck your outside into the lining. And I just like to curl up my ties, make sure they're down in there so that they don't get sewn over. You want to sew over this edge, but you don't want to catch like the free end of your tie in your seam allowance. So I'm just going to tuck this down in there. Make sure it goes all the way down in. And then I like to start at one of the side seams, and I'm going to nest my seams. And what that means is I'm going to push one seam allowance one way and the other seam allowance the opposite direction. And this will help that little bump right there over those 2 seams lay a little bit flatter. So I'm going to add a clip there, and then I'm going to do the other side seam. Make sure they line up good. And then I like to add a clip kind of in the middle there. Make sure that your tie is laying nice and flat and straight underneath there, so that it'll get sewn in that seam straight. You don't want it like off like this and then get sewn over crooked. So make sure that it's nice and straight in there. And now we're going to sew around this edge, leaving an opening to turn this. So what I like to do is I will either mark it with a pen, or I will put 2 pins in there. But you're going to sew all the way around it, leaving the space open so that you can turn it right side out. So let's see, I'm going to do that little spot on the back so it's a little less noticeable. And I'm just going to stick 2 pins in there, and then you're going to leave an opening about, I don't know, 3 to 4 inches long. I like to do it underneath the ties though, so that I make sure that I sew over this tie and I catch that in there. So I'm going to start right here, sew all the way around, and end right there. Actually, I'm going to do it the other way. Once again, you're at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you just want to adjust this. If you have a machine that has a free arm, you can wrap this around the free arm to where the body of it is underneath the machine. That's a little easier to do. Oops, just pulled that pin out. Make sure you backstitch well at the beginning and the end. And I've left that little space open in between there. And now you can turn your whole book sleeve through that hole. If you were making this with the flex foam, it might be a little more difficult to turn, so you might want to leave a little bit bigger of an opening, but quilt batting squishes it nice and tight, so that's not a problem. Whenever you have a hole that you're turning something right side out through, you always want to make sure that you backstitch really well at the beginning and the end, because you see how much stuff we're pulling through there? That creates stress on that seam allowance, and you don't want your seam to pop open and rip. All right, so we've pulled that all the way through. I'm going to pull out any loose threads that I have. Oops, another one. This gingham fabric really frays a lot. So now we have this opening right here, right? Well, how are we going to finish that? You're going to take your lining and you're going to tuck it down inside your book sleeve. And I like to poke the corners down in there with my fingers really, really well, get them all matched up. And now I'm going to take this over to my iron, and I'm going to give this a really good press. And so I'm going to take this seam allowance and make sure that it's rolled to the inside so that we have a nice clean edge right here. Give it a really good press, and when you get to the opening, you're going to press the raw edges in 1/4 inch so it'll line up with that seam allowance in there. And you may want to put a clip right there to hold it. And then we're going to top stitch, and that'll close up this seam allowance. And now that you've got it pressed, you're going to top stitch around this open edge. Now, if you have a machine that has a free arm and you can put your project in there like this and then sew around it without catching the bottom edge, do that. But my machine, I've got it set up for quilting right now, so it's got a big flat surface. So if your machine has a big flat surface, it's easier to top stitch with it wrong side out. So I'm just going to turn this the other way around, and I am going to start, I'm going to sew like this. I'm going to start just under this zipper, and I'm going to go all the way around, and I'm going to end right here at the top of this zipper. I'm not going to sew over the top of this zipper end, and that'll kind of help hold it down, because I know right now mine does not want to fold even when I press it. So we're going to top stitch at 1/8 inch away from the seam allowance. Away from the edge. Make sure your ties are out of the way. And I have threads poking out everywhere with this plaid fabric. Now, when you come to that opening that we had left, make sure that all of your seam allowance, make sure all of your raw edges are tucked in. I swear I need a nap after lunch these days. I don't know what is going on. It's like I can't think after I eat lunch. Make sure all of the raw edges are tucked in and that your side is nice and straight with that other seam allowance. And you're just going to sew right across it and it'll close that opening up. And then when you get right back to that zipper, you're just going to come right up to the edge and then back stitch to lock your stitches in. And then trim off any loose threads. And then you're going to turn it back right side out. Make sure your corners are nice and poked in there, and you are done. So you can add your book, your journal, your notebook. Let's see, I have a little notebook over here. Let's see if this one fits. So I have one of these. This is a 5 3/4 by 8 3/4 notebook, and I can just fit this right in there and tie this up, and then I can add any of my pens or markers or highlighters, whatever you need for your book or your Bible or your notebook or your journal. You can tie those up in there. Keep them nice and tight so they don't fall out. And then you can take your pens and you can add them into the zipper. And this pattern comes in 4 different sizes. So I'll show you all 4 of them next to each other so you can see the size difference. But even the small one, this is the medium, this is the small one. I designed it to where a pen will fit down in that pocket. And so you can have your small books, your small Bibles, whatever in there. And you can still have all of your pens and highlighters. So I'm making these for to put at the booth for my daughter. We're doing a market tomorrow. So I'm doing one of each size to have in her booth. Just to test it out and see how people like it. So I'm going to finish up the other 2 sizes and then I'll show you all 4 of them together for size reference. Okay, I'm doing this really informally. My studio is a disaster. We're doing a farmer's market for the first time tomorrow. So I have spent a whole week baking sourdough bread and making cookies. And my husband's been making fruit leathers and all kinds of things. So trying to get out my 1 pattern per week as my plan, but I've had this already halfway drafted up for a while, so I thought, oh, I'm just going to finish this one and get this one out this week. So super informal video. Anyway, let's look at the different sizes. So we've got a small and a medium, and then we've got a large. Let's see if I can hold all these, and then we've got the extra large. So let me show you what will fit in them. So a small finished measurements, I'm going to look over here on my computer. The finished measurements are 6 inches by 8 inches, and it will fit paperbacks, and according to the measurements on their website for Kindle, the Kindle Oasis and the Kindle Paperwhite. Now, I don't own a Kindle, and I'm not really a big reader, so all of my books are downstairs, and I didn't go down there to get one. But according to the measurements on their website, both of those should fit in this small. And then you have the medium. The finished sizes for a medium are 10 inches by 7 inches, and they'll fit bigger paperback books, like thicker ones, compact and hand-sized Bibles, according to a Google search of standard Bible sizes. And then it will also fit Kindle Fire HD 7s and 8s in here. And it will fit, I have some notebooks here. This little notebook from the Dollar Tree, this is 5 3/4 inches by 8 3/4 inches, and that one will fit in there. And all of them, the pockets will fit pens, highlighters, rulers, markers, whatever you need to journal with. So there is the medium. Sorry, this was the medium. Sorry, I have them laid out in the wrong order. Medium. Then the large measures 8.5 by 11, So pretty much the same size as a sheet of paper, and it will fit hardcovers, planners, journals, and the Kindle Fire HD 10 according to their measurements. Now I don't have one to try in there, but you could fit a pretty good size book in here. Now these all open up, so you've got some depth in there, so you can fit a fairly wide book in here and still tie it. Then you have the extra large. The measurements on this are 9 by 11.5. This will fit larger hardcovers, regular and large Bibles, and tablets and notebooks. I don't have my iPad up here, but I think my iPad would probably fit in here. And a regular size spiral notebook will fit in here. This is a regular notebook paper, 8.5 by 11 notebook, and it does fit in here. So it fits in there like that. And then you just tie it. And then you can put all of your fun stuff, pins, markers, stickers, all those things. If you have a planner, will fit in the pockets on the front of there. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. This one's been a long time coming. I've had these drafted up for quite some time. Just needed the motivation to get them finished. So you could change this up with all sorts of fun fabrics, coordinating fabrics, fun zippers. You could use ribbon to tie it with. If you don't want to make the ties, there's lots of ways to embellish this. You could embroider a kid's name on the pocket before you sew it all together. So many different ways to customize this. I hope that you guys liked this tutorial. Be on the watch, hit the subscribe button, like, thumbs up, all those YouTube things, because I do have a laptop case in the works. It's already cut out over there on my table. I just need to film the tutorial for it because my daughter requested a laptop bag for her new 15-inch laptop that she has. So I'm going to work on that and get that one out pretty soon. And then also I will have a zipper top version of this so that you can use it as a tablet, iPad, laptop case just to carry with a zipper and no strap or ties or anything on that. So be on the lookout for that. It's kind of back to school season, so I've got some like back to schooly type things in the works. Like I said, I'm just hoping that we can get through this farmer's market tomorrow. I'm hoping for good weather because it has been so extremely hot here over the summer that markets for my daughter have been kind of very sweaty. So I'm hoping for great weather tomorrow. Get through all of this. I can get my kitchen cleaned back up and get my studio back in order. And then that way I can keep pumping out these patterns. So be on the lookout for those. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to follow me on all the social media at By the Bay Bag Co. on everything. Be sure to follow my TikTok account. That's where I post most of my stuff. Instagram, I post a lot of things on there. We do have a Facebook page, but I'm not really on Facebook, so everything just kind of automatically posts to that. So the best way to get a hold of me, if you need to get a hold of me, is through Instagram, or you can always email me at bythebaybagco@gmail.com if you have any questions. And you can find all of these patterns, this one and all of my other patterns for all of these sewing tutorials on my website, bythebaybagco.com. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching.